Hello everyone and welcome back to round 10 of the Tata Steel Masters. I'm going to show you the game between Magnus Carlsen and Viswanathan Anand. So Magnus had white in this game, Anand with black. It was a fairly long game, so I will be showing you the position from move 52. The opening was a Ruy Lopez and Carlsen managed to secure an extra pawn. So in this position, Anand is currently threatening mate on c2. So Carlsen plays rook to h2 defending. Black can of course try to keep material on the board with rook to e4, and it's actually difficult for white to try and make progress. How does white actually deal with the attack on the knight? If knight f2, then simply rook e2, once again threatening mate, so knight back to g4, and black can repeat the position with rook to e4. So if white tries rook h6 check, this runs into king g5, attacking knight and rook. And white cannot take on b6 because of this knight d5 check. So here rook to e4 is definitely a good defensive try. But Anand decides to exchange the rooks and go for a knight ending where black is down a pawn. And now Anand brought his king towards the queenside where the action is happening. So here Carlsen played knight d3, threatening to win a pawn by taking on b4. So Anand played knight to c6. So trading would simply lead into a losing king and pawn ending. And here there is another move that black can consider. Perhaps the most challenging defense is to play knight a2 check. So here are only two moves possible for white. King b2 and king d2. If king d2, then black liquidates with c4. And this should be easily drawn for black. And if king b2, then you can play knight back to b4. So if the knight is taken, then this is actually a drawn ending. So if c3, then you can take. So here black has this drawing motif with b5 check. King b6, and this is a draw because white cannot get his king in front of his own pawn. So if instead of playing with c3, let's say king c1, well, this leads to similar results. So if white wants to achieve anything, he has to break with c3. But then we have this similar drawing motif with the move b5 check. So after king b2, knight to b4, if white wants to make any progress, he has to try something else. For example, knight f4 check, king to c6, and here black is ready to liquidate with the move b5. So white can try and push a5, but here black can safely cover the passed pawn, king d6, now preparing knight to c6. And if a6, then king c7, king b6 on the next move. But let's go back to the main position. Knight c6 played by Anand. Possibly still a draw with accurate play. So Carlsen must try to keep as many pawns as possible on the board, because if black manages to trade off his pawns, then he can sacrifice his own knight for one of these pawns. So we have knight f4 check from Carlsen, king d6. So black has to be careful not to stray too far away from his pawns. If king to e5, then there's actually this very nice move from white. King to c4, giving up the knight for the b6 pawn. So here white can start pushing with b4, king e3, b5, king d2. Basically, white's pawns are just too quick, and this knight cannot stop the pawns on its own. And here white is simply queening. So here king d6 from Anand. We have king to c4, knight to a7, knight to d5, king to c6, knight e7 check, king d6, knight f5 check, king c6, and now king to d3. King c7 from Anand. So in this position, b5 definitely possible, trying to liquidate the position. And if a5 from black, king c7 with the similar idea of going knight c6. But Anand decides to play king c7. And now king e4, Carlsen starts to improve his king. And slowly but surely, black is being pushed back. c3, that just takes away some squares from the knight. Knight e7, king e5, knight g6 check, king f5, knight e7, king e6, and knight g6 from Anand. So white has improved his position and his king is very active. But is this enough for a win? Well, maybe not, but here Carlsen keeps trying. So now he plays the move a5. So hoping for some chances after grinding tirelessly for 70 moves. And Carlsen got his reward. Anand finally cracked with the move b5. The only move which gives Anand drawing chances is b takes a5. So this simplification makes it difficult for white to convert his extra pawn. So now king d5 attacking c5. But here knight f4 check. Followed by knight e2, c3 is falling, and black will soon give up his knight for the last remaining pawn. But here Anand played b5, and this is a mistake. In the previous position where black allowed this a5 advance, well, he had access to this c6 square for his knight. So black can basically eliminate this pass a pawn without much problems. But in this position, black's knight is on the other side of the board. So let's see how Carlsen converts this position. First he plays knight e3, getting out of the attack. Knight f4 check. So Anand trying to get the knight back into play. Knight e2, knight to d5 check to protect c3, king c6, and b4 from Carlsen. So creating a protected pass pawn, and black is almost in zugzwang. So if king b7, then king d6, white's king approaches. So if king d7, then there's a6. So king has to come back to cover this pawn, but here b takes c5, and this is winning for white. So if knight to c1, then c3 is no longer an issue. White can safely play knight e7 check, king c7. So if king d7, then again a6. Then you can take on b5. So here king c7, king d5, so that has to be taken. And white wins because king c5 is coming and b5 will fall. So if that is taken, then any move that black makes will eventually lead to loss of the b pawn. For example, king d7, knight f4, black cannot trade knights, so he has to play something like knight c3, king d4, and white's king eventually gets to the crucial c5 square, and b5 is going to fall. So in this position, Anand tried the move knight takes c3. We have knight takes c3, c takes b4, knight e2 from Carlsen, and it was in this position that Viswanathan Anand resigned. If black tries to go after the a pawn, for example, king b7, then knight to c1, king a6, knight b3, this protects a5. White's king will soon participate in the action and clean up black's remaining pawns. And if b3, then we have knight d4 check, king c5, knight takes b3, wins. If king b4, then simply a6. So fourth win for Carlsen in his typical grinding style. That puts him as the sole leader of the tournament, as Jan Nepomniachtchi, the other co-leader heading into this round, lost to Jordan van Forest. 3 more rounds to go, so anything can still happen. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.